Thank you, Rick. I don't know about all of you, but I think a lot of people are getting to the point where they've heard a lot and they're extremely tired. So please don't go to sleep. In our government group, I must say we were very, very fortunate to have the people in the discussion that we probably wouldn't normally get. We had former Congresswoman Linda Smith. We had Dr. Judith Reisman, Tom Minery from Focus on the Family, and Patrick Truman, who's the head of the Morality and Media. And you just don't get that kind of expertise gathered into the room all at one time. So we were very, very fortunate in that. You know, Ronald Reagan said there are no easy answers, but there are simple answers. And we just must have the courage to do what is morally right. When we look at government, we have to realize that there are 4 different levels. We start generally at the federal level, and then we go down to the state level and the local level. But we often forget that the very basic level, the cornerstone of our government, is found in our intact families and our mothers and fathers working together in a lifelong committed marriage. And that somehow seems to have been lost over the years and is probably the root cause of why we are facing the dilemma that we are facing today. And so we are facing those consequences, and we didn't get here overnight, as someone said before me, and probably many times so. We did not get here overnight. It was a gradual creep that came over time. And so we can't expect that we're going to be able to flip the switch and make us go back to the 1950s, and where fathers were respected in our homes, and mothers took care of raising children and supporting the husband, and we had a breadwinner at home. That is probably not going to happen unless we work really hard. And in Genesis 11, it says that the people were of one mind, focused on one thing with one language, and God came down and said, you know, they could do anything because they were focused. And I'm convinced that we can do anything if we will work together with all of our different groups and stay focused on one item. One of the things that we identified in our, we really tried to hone it down to what 3 things could maybe we accomplish over the next year. And we decided that one thing for sure was honing our message. If we could all talk about the same basic message, that would permeate from the local level all the way up through the top. And it would then make it in a situation where people started to understand when we walked into whatever office, or when we were talking with our neighbor over a cup of coffee. And the message that we came up with was that pornography leads to the victimization of women and children and results in the explosion of commercial sex, sex trafficking, violence within the families, and the demasculization within our families. One of the other things that we also came up with was that if we wanted to work on this, we were going to have to start at the local level, find out who our local law enforcement officers are, and ask them, what are they doing? How are they addressing this? And having a conversation at the local level, whether we're even getting on our school boards and in our public libraries and talking about it there. What are you doing that is advancing pornography and obscenity, and is there something we can do about that? Patrick Truman has put together a very nice piece that I will ask Rick to pass around. It's called Enforcing Federal Obscenity Laws. In this, he very concisely defines what is pornography according to the courts. What is obscenity? And then he also told us that obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment. And many times that's one of those arguments that puts us off because somebody turns around and says, well, it's free speech, but it isn't free speech. And so, and then he outlines or lists the actual obscenity laws that are already on the books. One of the things I think that Pat also reinforced to us earlier on was that if we would just enforce the existing laws, that we can have an impact. And that was being done prior to the Clinton administration. And since then, it's been sort of a hands-off, or we go to the most egregious, but we forget about the everyday sorts of things. And one of the things I wanted to point out to you is that the federal obscenity laws, which are not being enforced, prohibit the distribution of hardcore obscene pornography on the internet, on cable, satellite, or hotel and motel TV, and in sexually oriented businesses and other retail shops. Now, did you catch hotel, motel, TV screens? How many of us go to a hotel or a motel and there's adult content on the television sets? And in some cases, you can't even flick it on without coming right up to the very first screen. That's a moneymaker for them, and we have got to unify ourselves and start saying, we will not frequent your chain of hotels and motels if you will not take this off. And you know, the thing is that we have to do this, and it would make a difference if when our leaders of our organizations and our faith communities, when they're having a gathering, would say to a hotel chain, I'm sorry, we cannot frequent your particular hotels because of this. And that's one of the areas where we can take an active step in enforcing our existing laws and calling attention to those people. You know, one of the things that Alliance Defense Fund does frequently is send out to the schools a letter that describes a child's right within the school system, and it's amazing that once they get that letter and they understand what the law really says, how many of them will back off and say, okay, you can wear your pro-life t-shirt after all. Another thing that I would encourage you to do is that Patrick Truman also gave a magnificent presentation to the Congress in, what was it, 1995? It's been quite a while back, but it still applies today. And I urge you, if you get a chance, to Google that particular message and read it, because it's well worth your time. Another thing that we talked about is really working and bubbling up our efforts from the local level, because at the local level we can build relationships with those people who are those that can affect change from through zoning laws or through even addressing some of the fallout of our breakdown of the family and our breakdown and our pornography and our obscenity. If we can address those, we're better at it at the local level because we can build relationships with the people and the victims, and we can lead them. You know, government is really cold, and the further it gets away from that level, that personal level, the less effective it really, really is. And the third thing that we thought that needed to be done is to, hang on, I've got it in here. Oh, no, one of the other things in enforcing the laws that we talked about was unifying our message when we go up to Congress or any level of government actually, so that we can even get in the front door to talk to them about it. And one of the messages that we thought was effective would be to tie pornography to sex trafficking. So in other words, go in and say, you know, did you know that pornography leads to sex trafficking? And that is one of those hot terms now that will get their ear and they'll pay attention. And then you could lead on to say that pornography also leads to child pornography. And then follow that up with pornography leads to violence against women. And finally, that pornography leads to the breakup of marriages. Another thing that can be done at the state level, Linda Smith is working on this, is a template of laws that can be changed, just little nuances that can be changed in the state level of government that would help us. If we can get these going on in all 50 states, then we could eventually get it finalized in the federal law. And that is that domestic minor children sex trafficking, that is the prostitution of Americans' children, Americans' children, that's right. So those are things that we could do as far as enforcing laws. And finally, we need to be able to, at the local level, in our organizations, be able to enable those people who are our warriors, our feet on the ground, and they need talking points to be able to do that. One of the things I would recommend to you is that in your packets you received a recommended reading list. They're good. Some of them are short, some of them are long. You could have discussion groups about them, but the idea is to enable your people to be able to talk about this in ways that others would listen, and to show that it's not just something that we're morally objecting to, but something that we really do have scientific evidence of, and especially bringing forth the idea that this is not just something that maybe might affect adults, but that it really does have an impact on the children. One of the articles I was reading was about the young lady who was 12 years old, who felt she needed to sext her nude image to her new boyfriend. And then he broke up, they broke up, and then he went ahead and shared it with other friends of hers, and it eventually went all over the school. She didn't ever have an idea that that was going to happen. But the clue was, that I thought was very interesting, was we didn't talk about, the article didn't talk about the chemical changes that went on in the minds not only of her boyfriend or the two little girls that they sent this on to, but of all the children. All of those children were impacted chemically in their brains by the viewing of her nude body. Not to mention the other side effects. And the other clue that was in there that I found very interesting was Mom and Dad were divorced. This little girl was looking for a relationship that she couldn't find at home. So I ask you to equip your people with the information, the talking points that they need so that they can share it with others. And then, you know, Rick will send us all this, this language that we decided was really important to be a message. And if we can all start iterating that message and reiterating it, it will eventually change the minds, the hearts, and the souls of America. And that is, pornography leads to the victims of women and children, the victimization of women and children, and results in the explosion of commercial sex, sex trafficking, violence within the families, and the demasculization within our families. God bless you, and thank you very much.